Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Economic Alliance Snohomish County's December Coffee Chats presented by LISC Puget Sound, Locals Initiative Support Corporation, one of the nation's largest and most impactful community development organizations dedicated to building a resilient and inclusive communities of opportunities across America. I'm Wendy Poischbeg, Interim President and CEO of EASC, and it is my pleasure to be with you today for this critical conversation on housing and homelessness in Snohomish County. Housing and homelessness are two of the most pressing challenges facing our community. As we approach this upcoming legislative session in Olympia, this is the time to come together to better understand the complexities of the issues, highlight innovative solutions, and identify actionable steps we can take as a region to address them. I am thrilled to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who bring invaluable knowledge and firsthand experience to this discussion. They include Chris Collier, the Program Manager at Housing Authority of Snohomish County, Tina Vlasidy, Deputy Director of LISC Puget Sound, Rachel Downs, Director of Strategic Initiatives at Housing Hope, Bobby Thompson, Executive Director of the Housing Consortium of Snohomish County, and John Hull, CEO of the Everett Gospel Mission. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's just dive into this important conversation. To begin, we're going to invite Chris Collier, who now provides us with the latest stats on affordable housing for Snohomish County. Chris, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction. Ooh, don't want to share my Zoom screen. Hold on one second. The coffee hasn't quite kicked in yet this morning. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I will take it away for just 10 minutes or so as I get presentation all set. Kind of wave a hand, show that you can see my screen. Okay. Well, I'll try to, again, keep it to 10 minutes, just give you an update on how things have changed since you might have heard me last in Snohomish County with regard to housing. This slide I'll whip through pretty quick, but in brief, the blue bar is the total surplus, estimated surplus of housing stock that we have in Snohomish County if we start counting at zero in the year 2000. The green bar is the number of new homes we're creating every year relative to new housing or netted against new household creation. So we're operating at a surplus right now, but what you'll see in a couple clicks is that's mostly rental housing. And so sale price for actual ownership opportunities continues to rise, but this surplus of housing is keeping or reducing rental housing prices a little bit in 2024. So let's see that in actual numbers. You'll see this in the background, just for context. This brown line, I wonder what that's doing there. This brown line is the median sale price. Oh, I see. Something got messed up in my animation. I apologize. The brown line is the median sale price for a single family detached home in Snohomish County ending in November of this year. It's $822,211 is the median sale price for a single family detached home in Snohomish County from Edmonds to Stanwood to Darrington and all points in between. Now, most home purchases are not done with all cash. So let's assume we're putting 10% down on this median home. We're using the current annualized interest rate for 2024, paying county average property taxes, and a 33% debt ratio. So no more than 33% of your household income can be obligated to that required income. There we go. The yellow line is really the you must be this tall to ride line. It is now at $194,000 is the required income given those loan terms to purchase that median single family detached house. Now, if median household income in purple tracks with that, no problem. I don't know why things are off to the side. I apologize. The median household income in Snohomish County in 2021 was $112,000. It's declined since then. Indications for 2023 are that it will decline or not increase in 2023. So the degree to which these lines are diverging is really the start of our problem. And again, I apologize for the technical glitch. So this is ownership. It rolls downhill from here to townhomes and condominiums and to rents. What has rent done? Rent looks like this. So you can see that in 2023, all of this is adjusted for inflation, by the way. 2023, we're at $2,200 a month in average rent from a studio to a 3-bed from Stanwood to Edmonds. We're now at $2,144 for the county. So rents again are coming down as we have a surplus of housing stock, giving people options, and landlords are starting to compete and reduce prices. But again, ownership remains high. So let's look at how ownership in particular has changed in Snohomish County. And now I'm scared for the next slide to see what's going to happen. So this is a count of all homes that sold by price band. So this little brown squidge you see in the bottom is homes that sold in Snohomish County for less than $100,000. This is all adjusted for inflation to 2024 dollar values. You can see it's never been a lot. The next band, 101 to 200,000, 200 to 300. Now we're talking, and historically, that was quite a lot of homes in Snohomish County back in the early 2000s. 300 to 400. Oh, now there's even more, 400 to 500. And then finally, 5 to 6. So you can see in gray, yellow, and blue, that was the majority of our home sales for, I don't know, the first 10, 15 years of this new century. But then in green, five to $600,000 homes start to become a larger and larger portion as we head into 2016, 17, 18, and 19. Then we don't have a lot above that. 600, 7 to 800, 8 to 900, 9 to 1 million. But then watch this. Over $1 million home sales in red on the very top suddenly emerge in 2021 as a huge portion of our home sales and remain a dominant force, actually the largest single category if you break it down by $100,000 groups. If you want to get really nerdy about this, in the background, this is what it looks like as a percentage total, because we're working with declining percentages. And so if you just say, what percent of this year's home sales were for over $1 million in 2024, that number is over 20%. 20% of all homes, from a single family home to a mobile park home, manufactured home, are for over $1 million in Snohomish County this year, this is new. You can see this emerging quite rapidly in 2021. So that's worth taking note of. What about renting? 2000 and 2013, rents haven't changed too much in Snohomish County. They've stayed basically flat after you adjust for inflation. By 2022, they're up 71%. And again, in 2024, on average, we're down to $21.14 a month for all of 2024. That's the first time rents have declined in over 15 years in Snohomish County, and they've declined by 3%. On average, all unit types decline by 3%. You can see studios decline by 4, 2 beds by 2, or 3%, excuse me. And so it's a little varied across the county, and I can do this city by city. I can do all of this city by city if anyone would like, so feel free to send me an email. So that's where we're at. Something that I think is worth pointing out as we talk about this and do some level setting for the presentations to come is how people are experiencing this issue in their daily lives. And a way that I like to encapsulate that is, if you bought your house in 2014, given the loan terms I mentioned earlier, you're probably paying about $2,600 a month in your mortgage. That's your monthly escrow, your monthly mortgage payment. And that's about what a 3-bedroom apartment costs today. 81% of homeowners locked in their rent, their rate, in 2014 or earlier. 81% of the county's current owners moved into the place that they currently live in 2014 or older, or earlier, excuse me. So as we think about this issue and how people relate to it, we have to recognize that most people bought their house, which is a majority of the county. Most people are living in a circumstance where they aren't experiencing this housing crisis. It's only people that are currently renting or trying to be that first-time home buyer today. And so that's something that we have to recognize as we engage with the public, as we think about this issue ourselves. When did I buy my house? How much am I really experiencing this myself in my daily life? And there's a lot to go into, and I'm skipping over a lot because I'm trying to leave time for everybody else. Second to last slide is occupational income. So take all the occupations in the Central Puget Sound region, Snohomish, King, Pierce, and what's their median income? So, and how many people work in that grouping of occupations? 11,000 people are in a job where in the middle of their career, whether they're going to be there, are there, or were there earlier and now make more, 11,000 people are making $240 or more. On down, down, down. You're wondering, why is this graph so tall? Why is there so much unused white space at the top of this graph? It's because there's 750,000 people or so that in the middle of their career, again, whether they will make, currently make, or have previously made this much, is $56,000. That's the mid-career income for their current profession. And remember, this is the line for you must be this tall to ride in 2023 for Snohomish County, because this is data from 2023 from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So you can see that only 17.5% of the central Puget Sound, the Seattle Metro's workforce could afford to buy something somewhere on a single income in Snohomish County. If you cut that down just to single family home ownership, it's only 1.6% of the Central Sound region if they're putting 10% down and 33% DTI. Only 33% or 700,000 people could afford to rent something affordably, the average apartment in Snohomish County. And then 67%, over 1 million people could afford to do neither of those things by themselves. So what about dual income? That's fine, but let's set aside the edge case of, doctor marries hairstylist or anesthesiologist marries barista, right? Where the income is really lopsided in the household. Assume people cohabitate of basically similar incomes. Even if you combine, two incomes at that less than $56,000 group, you're still only looking at affordable renting. You'll affordably rent for your whole life. You'll never get into ownership. And I would argue that is a problem in the current system that is at play in America. What if I make less than the median? And we have to recognize that based on your race, based on your gender, your other demographic things about you, you will make more or less than the average. This is per capita income per person by race, reported by the Census Bureau for Snohomish County. And then by family, which might be more indicative or more germane, see white, Black, Native American, Asian, Hawaiian, etc., basically following the same trend. So this can be there is more nuance to this that I don't have time to speak to today, but that we should recognize as we engage with this. And also ableness. If you're a disabled male, you will make $20,000 a year less than a non-disabled male on average. Same thing for female. So there is a lot of more variety that is below the surface here that affects all of this. So I like to summarize by saying it can get worse. Quick conclusions: home sale prices are continuing to rise. The fact that interest rates stay at about 6.7% continues to keeps that required income level quite high. There's more to that I could go into. What is for below $400,000, is multifamily condos, 302 of those, or mobile home park homes, 305 of those. That's the majority of what sold for below $400,000 in Snohomish County this year. And now, as I mentioned, $1 million homes are now over 20% of all sales in 2024. So rent is falling. Rent fell early in 2024. Now it's starting to tick back up. So we'll see what that does. Things are not equal. The demographic information for Snohomish County from the Census Bureau is coming out this week. So I hope I get to come back and talk about that. Is this an emergency? Last 2 points. It depends on your time horizon. Is this an emergency for you sitting here listening to me talk today? No, it's not. Is it an emergency for example, we don't have enough firefighters to provide adequate fire service in Snohomish County? Well, maybe, right? When are you going to need that fire service response that might be impacted by housing affordability or the lack thereof? So it depends on your time horizon. So think about that. It might not be immediate for you, but maybe in the long term it would be. So what stands in our way of fixing it? It's like, so Chris, give me a solution. It's overcoming people's statement back to 80% of people bought before 2014 is it's not an emergency to me yet. And a lot of what we need to think about is this is going to be an emergency for us soon, if it isn't already. If anything else, think about where your kids are going to live. Think about where you might want to retire to or downsize to or. So that is really what stands in the way of us getting to grips with this issue. And it's something that depends on all of us and how we think about it. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to our next speaker. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So what I heard, what I heard was that you needed $194,000 to be able to purchase, but the median income is $112,000, making it a real delta of being able to afford the bare minimum. I mean, I can speak to this from experience. I'm really concerned about where my son is going to be, if he ever will be able to afford home ownership. And there's been times where I am critical, the avocado toast but then I recognize that, man, he is you gotta be here. The bare minimum is what used to be everybody's echelon. So I'm living it. So, well,
Absolutely.
let's go to our Q&A with our panel. It's a reminder to those joining us via Zoom to please enter your questions for the panel into the chat, and we will relay them to our guest as time permits. John, let's go ahead and begin with you. From your perspective, how does the lack of affordable housing contribute to homelessness in Snohomish County? And what role do transitional or supportive housing programs play in bridging that gap?
All right, thank you, Wendy, for the invitation today to join you all. And following up on Chris is like following up on a fireman with a hose, just going at it with us. So I've always found myself overwhelmed by the stats and the information, but encouraged that we at least have some knowledge of the situation. And I think what we see from Chris's report is at its foundation, homelessness is a housing problem. So housing that is not accessible, affordable, and supportive, or housing that is accessible, affordable, and supportive is how we get people out of homelessness, how we shorten the time that those households spend without a roof, and how we prevent it from happening at all. So I like to say if we had a housing system that actually provided a spectrum of supportive housing costing $500 a month, we would see the number of unhoused fall dramatically. I can speak directly to this from the number of folks that we serve at the Everett Gospel Mission, often middle-aged, 40 to 50, on fixed income, have worked well their whole life, and are now finding themselves living on disability without finding a place where they can live and afford. If we had policies in place, we had zoning requirements in place or allowances in place, and we had neighbors that would allow us to develop projects that we could provide affordably for $500 a month, most of those individuals wouldn't need to be in our shelters. So I think that is the systemic issue. As far as the role that shelters and transitional housing play, we like to call them bridge housing. We have gaps in our housing system. We don't have enough housing to house the individuals that are experiencing homelessness. So we need a responsive system that allows us to stabilize individuals wherever they're at. So shelters, bridge housing, transitional housing provide a place of stabilization and a critical part to provide rest, safety, and stability for the persons that stay there, that they might be able to see a different tomorrow. So the biggest thing is when you're out on the streets fighting the war of homelessness, you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from. You're just working to survive the day. You can't think about how you're going to look at tomorrow differently. So these bridge solutions stabilize people so that they can think about a future and make a difference, make a different decision than where they're at and just surviving today.
Sorry. Thank you, John. Tina, how does LISC Puget Sound work to address systemic barriers to housing affordability? And what recent initiatives have had the greatest impact to our region?
Thanks for that question. Our organization, for those of you who don't know us, is a national economic development and affordable housing organization. We're also a financial institution, so we finance real estate projects primarily. And we have been doing work in Washington State for 30 years. And so really excited that I've been able to do a lot of work in Everett and Snohomish County. I think one of the things that is really important for all of us, and I know Bobby will touch on this, is just thinking about the policy issues of like, what are our tools and how do we create an enabling environment that encourages the production of units that are affordable, that allow people to have housing stability. Because I think one of the things that we can touch on, but that we can understand from our own lives is how important it is for people to be able to be in their housing for the long term, and what that does for families. So kids in the same school for a long time, people having the same connections to neighbors and to their faith institutions, and being able to have a regular commute route that you're familiar with, and knowing your grocery store, right? Like, so like all of those things that are really important for family stability, for community connections, I think are really important in helping to make sure that families can achieve the things that they need to achieve. So I think the enabling environment and policies are really important. LISC has definitely been very engaged in that work. And locally, I think, when I look at some of the recent legislation that's been passed, I know there's been, a new capital program in Snohomish County that has provided additional resources. There's House Bill 1590 that has provided more resources for behavioral health. I think one of the things that we know is, and I put in the chat, is we need the more production of units, and a significant number of those units, I think something like 50% of the new units need to be affordable to families at the lowest level of income. That in order to do that, it takes resources, and it takes all kinds of housing across the entire spectrum. So I'll pause there because I think we're going to get into some other things later, but I think that we all need to recognize that that we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of people across the income spectrum as we're addressing the production of units.
I want to throw a question out that we got in the chat from Larry Donk, because you mentioned House Bill 1590, Tina. What about House Bill 1998, the co-living? Would that be helpful for housing? He just mentioned that this was a comment that Rep. Eslick made at our legislative breakfast. Does anybody want to touch on that?
I can comment on that.
Thanks, Chris.
Sure. I would say anything is good. Any unit's a good unit. I don't care where it is, what it looks like, where it is. I said that twice. Really, so I would say it's good. The question really, in my mind, is going to be, will the building community take it up? Will the mortgage lenders, the insurers, and everybody else really take that up with gusto and allow that to happen? You can build the plan, or you can draw the plans up for it, but the question is, can you actually get it built? Would someone buy it if it's actually built and of decent quality? Yeah, I'd say so. We're talking about the need for variety and just opportunity to get on the equity ladder to anything at all. So if you can get it up, I think someone would buy it. But the question is actually getting there at scale to really make that dent. When Tina mentioned, I think in the chat, of needing 1.1 million new units by 2040, which I agree with, so it won't hurt. I'm not going to say no. And again, it's variety that's very important to show the way of, again, variety in our housing stock.
Thank you. Chris, we're going to stay with you. How can local governments and housing authorities work more effectively to streamline the development of affordable housing projects?
Ooh, can I pitch that to Lori Olson, the new CEO of HASCO? It's first and foremost is talk to each other. The number of cities that don't understand that they have a housing authority that can do all sorts of exciting things if asked is vast. It's really starts, the most important thing is really the easiest, and it's just learn what is possible and what's available and have that conversation. So many cities have a ready, fire, aim approach. It's okay to go out and just consult with the housing authority. That's literally in the statutory language that creates them, is to do reports, experiments, all sorts of fun stuff to support cities. And from there, you can grow into what specific little things can we change in our code to make partnership more possible. There's a lot in statutory language that encourages and allows for that. And really, we just need to know that it's there, which is kind of my job. So.
Well, that leads us to a good segue to Bobby. From your perspective at the Housing Consortium, what are the most promising collaborative efforts currently underway in Snohomish County to combat homelessness?
Yeah, I think that, in talking with Chris a lot about those numbers he shows, he often talks about those as his doom and gloom numbers. And Chris and I talk often about trying to have a glass half full approach to the challenge and like trying to find solutions. And I think that the piece in, really how challenging those numbers can appear is that by yourself as a nonprofit organization or someone who is trying to look at that and find solutions, you're never going to find answers. And I think that the most encouraging part of the work that the consortium has been able to be a part of in 2024 is really being part of initiative-based work, partnering with the Community Foundation of Snohomish County and LISC in our efforts on Casino Road in South Everett to really not come in and necessarily say that we have answers to what the challenges could be in a certain community. As everyone's aware, light rail is coming. to the Casino Road area as it expands to Everett. And a very big fear in the community is that through that innovation coming in, those that live in the neighborhood will be priced out of being able to afford housing opportunities in that neighborhood. And so there needs to be a lot of intentionality to get in front of that and not only preserve a lot of passively occurring affordable housing that is out there right now and codifying that as safe, decent, affordable housing, but also creating new units to the need that was mentioned, obviously, and demonstrated in Chris's presentation. And so the work that is going on with LISC and community partners like Connect Casino Road, and really what are the concerns, not only for the folks that live in that community that have a very rich culture and a long history in that region, but like also the businesses and the community organizations. And I think that, us not coming in and saying we have the answers, but really hearing what, the feedback is on what the solutions need to be based on what the people that live there are experiencing and what they want to see in their community. And I think that you start to do that work in an intentional way, hear what people have to say, and start to create a work plan, that creates new units, that preserves affordable housing, that creates new home ownership opportunities that maybe aren't traditional, maybe not your traditional detached single family homes. And I think that when you start getting people in the room from the private sector, the philanthropic sector that can kind of have some buy-in to what those goals are, you start to really see solutions. And we're already experiencing little wins in the realm of comp plan, contributions to the city of Everett in partnership with them, Sound Transit being at the table, being a part of those discussions. But you're also getting experts in the field that are able to come in and take and hear what the neighborhood has to say, and we can actually find solutions. So I think that as we move forward, this initiative-based model, especially coming out of COVID, where a lot of our relationships may have been fractured and we're coming back together, it's a real opportunity to go county-wide and find solutions that are community-based. Based on, and if we can just actually get in a room and start listening to one another and really creating work plans that meet the need.
That's a really good example with Sound Transit in the city of Everett and making those changes within the comp plan. Thanks for sharing that. Rachel, how does Housing Hope ensure that housing solutions are tailored to meet the specific needs of diverse populations within our community?
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today. Just a little bit about Housing Hope for those who aren't familiar with us. We are a 38-year-old nonprofit organization here in Snohomish County that develops and owns and operates deeply affordable housing. So we have 653 apartments throughout the county, half of which are designated for families who are coming directly from experiencing homelessness with incomes below 30% of area median income, and the other half are for families who cannot afford market rate rent and have incomes below 50% of area median income. So all of this is very important to the work that we do. That type of housing does not get built and is not sustained without these collaborative relationships, exactly what Bobby and Tina and Chris were talking about. It takes a lot of intentionality and a lot of work for these programs to be successful and to keep running for years to come. One thing that has been core to Housing Hope's model is exactly like Bobby said, is listening to the local communities. We have a model that is regionally based. So we have not only our fiduciary board of directors, but we also have regional advisory boards in North County, East County, South County, and we're forming one in Everett to listen to local leaders, people who have lived experience of not having a home, to hear what their community needs specifically, because each community is different. In fact, every specific housing community we build is different based on the context of how big it is, how many people live there, what kind of neighborhood it's in. And so that listening to the community is very core to what we do. And all of our services that we provide for families are tailored to the needs of that specific individual. We have staff who work with that family on their own unique goals. And so it's very important to to be person-centered in this work because, you know, for every person who is experiencing homelessness today on our street, they have a unique story of how they got there and then what is their path forward. And so that's what Housing Hope tries to do. You know, housing is our foundation. It's our first step. It's not our last step. We are fundamentally an anti-poverty organization, and that's the core of our work.
Thank you, Rachel. Tina, let me go to you. How do funding mechanisms like tax credits or public-private partnership play a role in scaling housing solutions?
I'm going to comment on that, and then I want to go to the NIMBY comments in the chat because I have some thoughts on that as well.
Appreciate it.
So that's like that's probably a whole hour in and of itself. But so I think we've talked, and I love how smart all of the attendees of this are, because people are putting in the chats. I'm like, they really know their stuff. Like, we're talking about Section 8, we're talking about different the House bills. So I just really appreciate people's like knowledge on this subject. I will just say that you know, we have like, I don't know the statistics, but like way oversubscribe every year on low-income housing tax credits. Like, that is the primary way that we fund affordable housing. And we do not have enough of them to support the number of projects that we need. Those tax credits and those resources are so competitive that what it does is it stretches out the timeline for these projects and makes it more expensive to build them. So that is a huge challenge in how we currently fund affordable housing. I noticed in the chat somebody talking about Section 8 vouchers. I think that is a great resource. Also, there are not enough of them, especially project-based vouchers, which are really helpful in getting things financed. So I think, you know, some of this is advocacy, educating our friends and neighbors, and recognizing that stable housing is not a partisan issue. We all benefit when everyone has housing that is stable, and again, people can have, you know, positive outcomes for their family, and that helps our whole community. So I think we also have to think about this as a whole community solution. And I think we also, especially in our current political environment, are very fear-based in what we think about. So I'll comment on that a little bit about the NIMBYism, but I think we just have to really make sure that if we are the folks in this space who understand affordable housing and think it's important, we have to talk about it with others so that we can all advocate for more resources, because that helps everybody. The other thing I'll comment on is multifamily tax exemption programs are hugely important, especially for smaller and for-profit developers. And so those are a great option for adding middle housing when we're talking about more 80%, between 60 and 80% area median income, which is just above some of this more deeply affordable and supportive housing. Again, that is like to Bobby's or to Chris's point about housing of all types. Like, that is really important because we need to produce units, and we need to produce units at a variety of scales. So I think like that's my comments on the, you know, the subsidy sources. We can't have affordable housing without subsidy, and so I think making sure that we are all advocating for those subsidy sources is critical. I do want to come to the NIMBY comment because, you know, that is true in all communities. And I want to give a quick story of my own neighborhood. I live on near a thoroughfare, a main road in West Seattle. There's going to be a 100-unit apartment building on what is now a single-story building on the corner. My neighbors were up in arms about parking because everybody loves their parking. And there was like this, like, what do we do? How do we fight this? Kind of in our WhatsApp chat for our neighbors. And so I just took it upon myself to try and educate my neighbors and say, look, we all don't like homelessness. We can't house people if we don't build buildings. And we don't have the right to park in front of our houses in a city. We all have driveways. And we have to be reasonable about, like, you can't have it all. You can't say you love the foothills and the mountains, but you don't want sprawl, and you don't want an apartment building in your neighborhood. And we also know that, you know, single family zoning has been the single most impactful tool for structural racism in our country. It was a way to keep people of color out of white neighborhoods. And so I think we have to start thinking about, like, how do we change that conversation, and how do we create champions within our communities who can carry the banner, who aren't like the government agency. And some of this, I think we also just have to really think about the connectedness of all of the issues. We don't just solve housing issues. We also have to think about workforce development and people's earning potential. We have to think about, you know, how safe public safety. Do people feel safe in their neighborhoods? And so we have to also just make sure that this is one of the reasons I love my work, is because it's very like integrated, is how do we make sure that we're thinking about all of the different tools we have to help people be stable? And I think that connectedness of community is really important in NIMBYism, is like thinking like we are all part of a single community. We need to help everyone achieve their potential. And I think the other challenge around NIMBYism is we listen to the loudest voices, the voices of people who are the most likely to be able to navigate government systems, who are the most privileged. And we have to stop doing that. We have to stop saying just because you're the loudest, you get to decide what happens for an entire community. So some of it takes bravery. Some of it takes, I think, just being able to help bust the myths about who is in affordable housing, and we can call it attainable housing. I think Chris Collier is like excellent at really thinking about how to talk so people will listen. And so I think we have to do all of those things. We have to connect people. We have to reduce people's fear. We have to help them understand who this benefits, and see that we all have to pull in the same direction to create healthy communities that we all want to live in.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about attainable housing. We've started to describe it as workforce housing here, just because it, you know, as an economic development, I mean, that's kind of softened like some of the conversations. And I admit, you know, we had to soften it a little bit just in order to get the message across. So, and I also just wanted to acknowledge for Angelisa Relente that I think we kind of touched on your question about, is there focus on preventing homelessness from happening in the first place, by addressing that it's not just you don't have a home, you have workforce challenges, we have a lot of other things. So I'm sorry we won't be able to get into that question in depth. I do want to move to John at the Everett Gospel Mission. You're on the front lines. You're addressing homelessness. Can you share some of the challenges your organization faces? And we need some success stories right now. Can you share a couple successes?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I've wrestled with this question. I think, in line with what we're hearing from the rest of the panel, our biggest challenge in this work is biases and solutions that are based on character flaws in the people we're serving. So when we determine that somebody is homeless because of a character flaw, we build systems to address that, or we create barriers to entry based on that. If we move to it's a structural issue in the way we design society, the way we design our housing. It's going to change the way we even work with those we serve. So our biggest issue, even for the Everett Gospel Mission, in moving toward our clients, hearing their stories and hearing them, is to understand, listen, you're not necessarily in poverty because you did something wrong. You're not experiencing homelessness because you did something wrong. This is not to say that there aren't things I could point to, but I know that I have functional addicts who live next door to me in my neighborhood. I know that I have individuals that have experienced trauma live in my neighborhood. All the things we could point to, mental health, addiction, laziness, if you want to call it. I don't believe in that term, but if you want to call it that, all those things, all those people live in my neighborhood. They're not experiencing homelessness. Here's Chris, I knew was going to be here, so I got a stat. So here's a stat. 945 was the number of households that we identified as experiencing homelessness in last year's PIT count. Even if we tripled that number, because we all know it doesn't necessarily represent all. So let's triple that number to 2,835. That means that 0.881% of households in Snohomish County are unhoused. Less than 1% are unhoused. So those that are experiencing homelessness on the streets, what I want to say is they're experiencing severe and extreme traumatic situations. Their stories are challenging and difficult. So our biggest challenge is to work with the complexities of the individuals that we work with, because there isn't one reason why somebody's experiencing homelessness. There are many that we have to work to address through relationship. Okay, some successes. I've been doing this for 18 years with the Ever Gospel Mission, and one of the things that I really appreciate about Snohomish County is the level of partnerships and the desire of different agencies to work together. I'm seeing that more and more. I think that is a part of our solution, that we are working together, that no one agency is trying to say we are the solution. And we're not looking for silver bullets. What we're looking for and moving towards as a community is a level of partnership and engagement to develop a system that's collaborative and that meets people where they're at in different spectrums, from extreme to less extreme experiences of poverty. So I think that that's hopeful for all of us.
That's awesome. Thank you. Rachel, can you talk a little bit more about prevention when it comes to housing and homelessness?
Yeah, so I kind of want to jump on the Chris Collier bummer train that, our system has such a scarcity of, housing period, and certainly scarcity of affordable housing, that I just want to name that our homeless housing response system that I'm part of, that John's part of, we are not set up to do prevention well. The way that our system is designed, it is set up to prioritize those who are most vulnerable, and which means that people, we we just lack a lot of prevention resources. You call 211 and you say, "Hey, I can't afford my rent anymore. I need affordable housing." The VOA who administers 211, they're turning away 250 households a week who call them and with that request, just saying that I am about to lose my housing, but I haven't gotten an eviction notice yet, because you don't qualify to go into the 211, the coordinated entry system, until you are living on the streets or until you have received an eviction notice and you have less than 14 days to vacate your housing. So our entire system is set up as a triage system where we're focusing over here on those who are most in the most serious crisis. And so what Tina's talking about, what Chris is talking about in terms of more housing of all types, that's our prevention mechanism. When we have enough housing so that rents are affordable and people have a place to go, that is our prevention. The homeless housing system is not set up to do that well. And so that's the societal benefit, when we think about the NIMBY conversation of how do we realize that we're all in this together, that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you hopped on the bummer train, but you brought up a good point. Bobby, what role do community-based organizations and nonprofits play in addressing housing insecurity, and how can we better support your efforts? I mean, I just heard, we've got to be more collaborative. We definitely need to, all speak to the same tune. Do you have any other thoughts?
Well, this is where I get to shamelessly plug the Housing Consortium of Everett and Snohomish County.
Plug away.
Plug away. We are a membership organization that consists of our membership consists of that community you just mentioned. So affordable housing development organizations, organizations that are housing providers, supportive services organizations that are providing the wraparound services we're all talking about to best meet the needs of those in these housing units. Organizations that are based in advocacy and policy work, that are doing the community engagement efforts that we're talking about, working on the front lines with clients and residents and community members for emergency assistance that may tie to loss of housing or eviction prevention needs. So there's a bunch of organizations in the nonprofit realm that really are in our membership, so we can work together to find solutions. How can the private market engage in that work and help us strengthen our efforts? I'd say there's a number of different ways. I'd say number one, a very low level baseline thing that I think the business community could do and underestimates at times is the capacity adds that they can bring to nonprofits by just simply picking up the phone, calling and saying, do you have any opportunities to serve on a committee? To serve on a board? You have no idea. I mean, I worked at Housing Hope with Rachel. I was there for 15 years. I learned so much from the building community, from the people that volunteered their time. I learned from bankers. I learned from the legal people with legal backgrounds. It helped us build our capacity to actually get projects done. So I'd say that if you have an interest in giving back, call a nonprofit that you're passionate about that does this work, and there's opportunity that exists there. I would say that, in talking about the NIMBY piece and talking about the community engagement piece and having the courage to step up and join nonprofits in really standing up against these challenges they face. I think that all of a sudden there's a lot more credence to community engagement work when big business gets behind it as well and really stands up for those that are in peril. And I mean, there's obviously, there's obviously all these organizations need financial support. I think that our nonprofit community at times gets a bit of a scarcity mindset because of how hard they're fighting on the front lines just to get stuff done. So there's always opportunities to provide grants and capacity building donations and actual capital dollars to help these projects get done. But I think that the place where I would really love to see our private community getting more engaged is in philanthropic innovation. I think there's a very good opportunity, both with, pilot programs about new housing solutions, whether that's modular housing. I know Frank Hong from the city of Everett's on the call, and he's very passionate about that. There's opportunities with different construction methodologies, and really kind of mixed use projects that we could be doing. And I think that leads into other things too. There's a lot of businesses, public entities that have surplus land. And one of the biggest drivers right now in the cost of getting affordable housing done is the driving cost that Chris talked about for purchasing land and assets. So if there are organizations and businesses that have surplus land and there's a passion point for really getting affordable housing units done, partnerships with housing development organizations that are doing this work, there are the experts where maybe you don't have the answer, but you have the asset, could really help provide solutions that meet a lot of the needs that we're talking about with these daunting numbers that are, that we're trying to meet the need for. So that's I could go on for that for a while. That's my Cliff Note version. Come join the Housing Consortium. There you go.
Yes, come join the Housing Consortium. Chris, what innovative approaches or partnerships have you seen emerge elsewhere recently that are helping to increase access to affordable housing? And do you think Snohomish County would benefit from adopting some different approaches?
Yes, it would benefit from adopting different approaches. What those are, boy, where they have worked. That's a hard question. This is kind of gets back to one of the earlier questions about 1998 and SROs is, did it bring prices down? Well, no, but you kind of have to squint and see, oh, prices didn't go up as much. It gave people options. So that's something that we always have to calibrate our measure of success against, is the scale of the problem that the size of the elephant we're trying to eat away at. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head, except to say that, and so this is a bit of a pivot, a think piece by an economist known as Chuck Marohn, who wrote Strong Towns, which is a book that I would recommend everybody give a read, really talking about how urban planning and housing as a result has kind of gone off the rails. He put out a think piece a couple of months ago, pointing out that housing will never truly be affordable while it's a profit driver, while there's profit to be made. Whether it's the builder, whether it's the landlord, whether it's the owner who's looking at housing and saying, I can make money off of this. You're always going to struggle with that affordability piece. And I believe that. And so a success story, I would say, is wherever you can find housing being created without that profit drive, that intent to generate as much money as possible, I think you will find successes. And so you can find them locally, you can find them nationally. But that's really the success that we should be striving for, is that housing is something that isn't a way for people to make someone else to make money. And again, that's also owners. Owners look at the value of their home and they say, oh, wow, look at all that, non-liquid value that I'm sitting on. Boy, I can really cash that out someday. So this is something that really isn't a them problem of, those darn greedy landlords. This is an all of us problem, to look at housing as kind of separate housing from a way to make money, which is quite contrary to the current American system. So, and I recognize that.
Bobby, what legislative measures or policies should be prioritized in the upcoming session to address housing and homelessness in Snohomish County?
Well, I know that we aligning with what Chris said, I think first and foremost, our utmost priority right now is going to be rent stabilization. I think that I think if we're going to get in front of the homelessness challenge moving forward, we have to quit making people homeless because of how cost burdened they are becoming. And so one priority we will be advocating for is rent cap increases at 7% annually for existing tenants and manufactured homeowners. It really provides stability for that kind of threshold of households that Chris was talking about in his slide deck presentation earlier. It protects low-income renters. And it also, I think it's within range of what Chris demonstrated with, as over the last 10 years, 71% rent increases. That's about 7% a year. And so it's policy that makes sense, and it really provides some form of stabilization for households moving forward. But in order to further bring down the need to have that kind of rent stabilization, we also need to have capital funding for affordable homes. And I think that, with the numbers that Tina was talking about, of the 1.1 million by 2040, we need to have a permanent source for the housing trust fund at the state of Washington. And so I think there will be a lot of active advocacy work to create that kind of as a permanent funding source. I think the case study I would give right now is that this year, for applications to the state for projects with the trust fund, there were 76 projects valued at application asks at $373 million for $91 million worth of funding. So it's just not adequate at this point in time. I would also say that we will be advocating for really to prevent cuts to homeless services. There's a budget shortfall that the state is experiencing. And I think that there are a lot of homeless services that are on the cut, on the chopping block. And I think that we need to be in full advocacy mode, because this problem that we're talking about will only accelerate greatly if those funds go away. A lot of the services we see being performed by great nonprofits in Snohomish County may go away if those funding sources are cut. And then I think that the tougher part about that is probably the last piece that I would highlight today, is trying to find progressive revenue solutions moving forward. I'd say that, I think our state code really is quite regressive in finding ways to, it limits funding for essential services. And I think that, we need to have real honest discussions about ways that we could adopt progressive revenue measures, to find solutions to, so we can sustain the capacity to build housing moving forward at all income levels, at all points in the continuum. So I think those are the efforts that we'll be pushing at the consortium this coming session.
Thank you for that. I look forward to figuring out how we can align our agenda to make sure that we're all speaking with one voice, one county, right? We don't have very much time. We still have a few questions. I do want to really touch with John that 24 point in time count. It's designed to provide a snapshot of folks experiencing homelessness in Snohomish County on a single night in January each year. It found that homelessness was down 9.6% from 2023, with the annual point in time count quickly approaching again. What are all the predictions for 2025? Can you make any predictions?
I think this is challenging to make a prediction. I'm uncomfortable with them. I think it's going to hold or go up, but I hope it goes down.
Yeah.
And I think as I was reflecting on what I went down and some of those partnerships I mentioned, there's a lot more agencies or groups doing work out on the streets and working to connect with people where they're at and get them into different housing through different funding, like medical funding, supportive housing funding. So there's some interesting innovations happening in our community that I think are helpful, and we might see that benefit us in the point in time count. At the same time, it's really hard to walk away from Chris's presentation and believe that it's not going to go up. Those rent numbers are so high, and the availability of rental for our clients is challenging. On that note, if I can just say, I'm going to drop something in the chat here. At the mission, we like to say that relationships got us into this situation, and relationships are what are going to get us out. If you haven't had relationships with people experiencing poverty and homelessness, you don't have good ideas for this solution, and you don't actually understand what's really happening. So one of the best things you could do is next month join the pit count and volunteer. So I'm going to drop in there Elizabeth Salazar's email. She is managing it for Snohomish County. And for all of you that are in business, that are in faith communities, that are out there, that have groups in your neighborhood, and you want to better understand what somebody's experiencing in poverty and homelessness, this is a great place to begin, where you can begin to develop those relationships that will help inform your solutions that you want to do in your life and in your neighborhood and in your community.
No, that's great. Thank you very much for that. We're out of time. If we could just take an extra minute, could each one of our panelists just share one thing that we can do this holiday season to make a meaningful impact? We need to go out on a positive note, I think. Can I start with you, Rachel?
Yes, we at Housing Hope this year, we're focusing on a towel drive for our families. And so I will put some information in the chat about that. That's just one way. Another way is to, of course, we are a nonprofit organization, is to make a year-end financial gift to our organization. It's tax exempt, and it's a really great way to support the entirety of the work that we do. So thank you for having me here today. It's been really fun to be part of the Bummer Train.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. John, we're going to move right over to you.
All right, I'm just going to jump on the find a place that you're passionate about and contribute. General fund, undesignated, unrestricted funding is what allow us as nonprofits to meet the need of where people are at. Like, we're close to the issue. We're close to the people experiencing this. We hear that most, and find an agency you trust and invest in them, because they're going to invest your dollars well in this community.
Thank you, Chris.
I would say this is something that you can do for free. Call your city council, send them an email, call your mayor, and say, hey, I support housing affordability in our upcoming comprehensive plan. Might be a little late for that, but I support that. For the elected officials on here, how often do you hear someone saying, hey, you're doing a great job, or please do more? Usually what you hear is, don't you dare, or I'll have your head on a pike in the ballot box. So be the counterpoint to that. Call and say it's okay that you give your elected officials permission to act on the information that they heard today. That carries a lot of weight. It really does. My past life, I worked for Governor Inslee, reading the mail of the whole state sent to the governor. It was just a few thousand people on any given issue. I mean, and it's much smaller for local issues. So use your voice. That's free, and it only takes 1 or 2 sentences in an email, and it really makes a difference.
I love that. I used to say, it only takes 3 calls to the mayor to get your way. I stick by that. Bobby, we'll lead that with you.
No, I just kind of building on what John said, just make connections. Make connections. I think this work can seem daunting, and it can seem like it's hard to find solutions, but we will find solutions together. And the work is actually, when you dig in and start finding solutions, it's actually kind of fun to work together and do this work. And so I just, again, if you have a place, there's a number of different places you can go. Join our organization. We do all kinds of events of networking. There's other great organizations, work with our nonprofit community. Just put yourself out there. And there's a lot of people doing really, really innovative, cool work in this field, and we could use your support. So come with us on the journey. Let's do it.
Thank you. Tina, let's leave on a positive note.
I really appreciate that. I just am so grateful for this conversation, and I think we just need to recognize that we live in an incredibly resource rich region, and there are possibilities and solutions, and we just need to commit to them. And so I encourage people to stay hopeful and stay curious and find a place, I think, to John's point, where you feel connected and take action, and be the NIMBY neutralizer. I think I just want us to know that this is solvable. This issue has been addressed in other countries across the world. And we can do this because we have so many resources and so many smart people, and we just need to do it together.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for being on this panel. To the folks, to the 100 of you that are on this call today, I know we couldn't get to all of your questions. If you need us to make a connection for you, please just email me, and I'll be happy to go ahead and connect you. Before we end today, we're just going to go to our gallery view, grab your coffee. I'd just like to thank you for supporting EASC all year long. We're looking forward to our advocacy session next year. And let's raise our coffee cup up. Cheers to the holiday season. And thank you again. Appreciate it.